Welcome to the Fastmarkets Pulp and Paper podcast, with a summary of the most important developments of the week and in-depth interviews with industry experts and leaders. Today, we will feature a panel discussion from Fastmarkets RISI's ICC conference, with a global review of new containerboard capacity around the world. It's moderated by Mark Weintraub of Seaport Securities. He will be joined by Fastmarkets RISI's economists Ken Waghorn, Gleb Sinofkis, and Beth Liz to review the explosion of containerboard capacity around the world. And now, the key takeaways for the week of November 2 to 5, 2020. Recovered paper. China's Ministry of Ecology and Environment updated its import guidelines for brass, copper, and aluminum, acknowledging, quote, scrap as a valuable feedstock that is essential to their manufacturers. On the back of this announcement, the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, or ISRI, is hopeful that the Chinese government will expand its recycled raw materials standard for other commodities, including possibly mill-ready recovered fiber. Mixed paper prices in the U.S. have increased for the fifth consecutive month in a row, reaching the highest levels in nearly 3 years. Recovered paper prices continue to increase in Southeast Asia on the back of strong demand and limited shipping capacity. Pulp. Worldwide producer pulp stocks declined by 475,000 tons, according to the Pulp and Paper Products Council, or PPPC. Graphic papers. Sappi Europe announced its intention to lift fine paper prices in overseas markets by 5 to 8% from January. Packaging. Several industry leaders and consultants expressed rising confidence in the potential of e-commerce to continue to drive demand in paper packaging at the Fastmarkets RISI ICC conference. According to Fastmarkets RISI economist Derek Malberg, the e-commerce channel should reach up to 25% of all retail sales in North America by next year. Finally, the 9th Fastmarkets RISI Asian Recycled Fiber and Containerboard Conference will take place in Haikou, China on November 25, 2020. This conference will be available for both in-person and virtual attendance. To register, click on the events section of our website, www.risi.com. And now, the panel discussion from Fastmarkets RISI's ICC conference, with a global review of new containerboard capacity by world region, moderated by Mark Weintraub of Seaport Global Securities.
And we're going to delve closer into the capacity side of the containerboard equation. We've got the global team here. Again, Ken, who we've already heard from, the outlook's going to really tour us through North America in particular. We've got Gleb Sinofkis, our expert on Europe, and Beth Liz, who is going to provide insights into that very difficult, at least for me, to get my arms around part of the world, Asia. So it's really good to have people who are on the ground who can give the perspectives from there. And really what we're going to focus on is how much is being built, where it's being built, why it's being built, the economics, and in particular, if we can try and look around corners to think about what might not already have been announced or changes that might take that might yet occur, that's going to be important in thinking through the supply side of the equation. So really, let's just kind of jump right into it. And Ken, just to start with you, from the North American perspective, how much is being built? I know you gave some of these comments earlier. And if you put it in perspective of the size of the market and what it is relative to historic norms.
Other than saying a massive amount is being built, the next 6 months, I think we have 1.5 million tons of new capacity hitting the market. Announcements out beyond that are over 3 million tons of potential supply coming. Question becomes, what's the timing? When does it start up? I mentioned in my presentation, I had a slide showing all the different announcements that were out there. It's all of 2 weeks old, and there are another 2 projects that have been announced in the North American market. So there is a lot of capacity coming in. What I see is really a mix of the different types. And we have existing producers who are putting in replacement machines, existing producers who are buying graphic paper capacity that they can convert and bring into the market. The potential disruptive factor is the new entrants to the market, of how they bring their capacity in and place their tonnage into the market. Domtar is the biggest of the ones coming in with the conversions. They've got a long plan of how it comes in. But I think it's a challenge of finding a home for that much tonnage.
So we're going to come back with and explore some of those issues in more detail, but just keeping it across the world for a bit. Gleb, how much is coming on in Europe? And if you could contextualize, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so we have around 4 million tons coming in both Western and emerging Europe through 2022. So a lot of capacity, as Ken mentioned during his presentation, in both Western Europe and in emerging Europe. And here we count in also Russia and Turkey. So really, most of it is, of course, recycle based and is in Western Europe. But we also have new kraftliner projects in Finland, in Russia. We have mixed furnish projects, so kraft top capacity developed in Slovakia by Mondi. So we have a lot of different types of containerboard as well, by different types of producers. We have existing graphic paper producers like Norske Skog announcing their conversion to recycled containerboard. We have some of the existing integrated producers adding more capacity. So really, everybody is a sort of adding some capacity in one way or another.
And when we think about the 4 million tons, I think Ken referenced in North America, it's about 3% next year, and it could be at those types of levels next couple of years. On a percentage basis, what type of increase are we seeing in Europe over the next couple of years?
So just historically speaking, if you take like last 20 years, we've seen around 2.5% growth in capacity and 2.5% growth in demand in overall Europe, including all of these countries I mentioned. So we had sort of a long-term, a balanced European capacity addition. Well, it was more added in Western Europe and more consumed in emerging Europe over time. It was more balanced. Now, in the next, let's say 3 years, including this year, so this year and next 2 years, we have around 3% growth versus around 2% demand growth. So clearly more capacity is being added than demand in the short term. So that's really highlights the point that there is a need for more exports out of the region. If all the capacities will start as they are announced and as we have knowledge at the moment.
Okay, so we got a little bit too much capacity probably in North America, a little too much in Europe. Got to find exports. Beth, we're counting on you. What's happening in Asia?
Sorry, we got too much coming on in Asia as well, both in China and other parts of Asia. It's incredible to me how many projects we've seen coming up in China since fourth quarter of last year into this year. The hardest part, I think, is putting a number. Is that if you look at a lot of the models that I have, we actually also assume a lot of closure, because otherwise we get operating rates down in the low 60s. If you don't assume that a lot of the smaller machines that have a harder, or the smaller players that maybe have a harder time adapting to the shift in the recovered paper availability. You know, the Nine Dragons, the Lianmans, the Shanyings, you know, they're all adjusting. They're, you know, you heard their Nine Dragons presentation this morning. They're all adjusting and, you know, trying to collect more locally and doing other things to try to bring in enough fiber. But we think the smaller guys must be struggling. And so we have assumed a lot of closure, and I'll go into more detail on it tomorrow. But so we have a lot coming on in China. We assume closures that help to balance that a little bit. But then we also have a lot coming on in the rest of Asia, much more than it had been in the past. I took a quick peek, and, you know, like 18 and 19, it was maybe 1 million tons a year. And now we're getting closer to like 2 million tons a year. And some of that is the local supplier, like the non-Chinese, but like China, I think, has 5 projects coming on in Vietnam and Malaysia. Nine Dragons, Lee and Man, again, they're all investing, probably looking to bring some of it back into China. You also have investments by others looking to bring it back into China, and probably also to support the local demand. But now that the local demand isn't doing as well, it's going to, because of COVID and then having to come out, you're just starting from a lower level. It's harder to get, the kind of growth you need in order to consume all the new capacity. Some of it is new machines, some of it is conversions. There's been a little bit of converting going, switching from graphic, APP's done a little bit. The newsprint suppliers actually have been going into lighter weight grades, looking to put it into China. Even AA paper, I think, recently converted a machine in Thailand. So there's a little bit of that. I think it's much more new investment.
And so Ken, if you could kind of wrap it all together, maybe throw in some comments on Latin America to get the complete picture on the global supply side.
You didn't really want to ask that question because, once again, you have oversupply. Longer term, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how well Klebene's eucalyptus-based kraft liner performs in the market, especially if there are issues on the bleached kraft pulp side with a decline in graphic paper demand. Is there going to be a push to get more capacity converted to make more eucalyptus kraft liner over time? I think that's a potential out there, but I think it has to be proven in the market before that happens. But, I had, the presentation, Rafael will have more information that, we have the excess supply coming in Brazil. The Brazilian producers are going to have to look to place their tonnage in the export market. And then even looking at Mexico, which is tied closely to the U.S. market. We've got capacity, recycled-based capacity starting up there, limiting the need to import. So it's really every part of the world you look at, we've got this excess. And it makes it difficult when we get together and put our forecasts and add them up on a global balance. That I worked with Beth of going through on how to do the balancing this last forecast. She and Gleb get to do that together in the next forecast along with Derek.
And what did you come up with in terms of like the net amount of new capacity globally likely to come on?
Yeah, I think the changes we ended up making where we had to tell Gleb that it's really going to be difficult for the Europeans to export as much as they want because there's this potential massive oversupply in Asia. Great.
And why is this all happening? Why are we getting so much capacity? Is it the same everywhere, or are there some different variables at play? And what does this tell us about what we may hear from going forward? Ken, you mentioned this morning, just in the last couple of weeks, we had Packaging Corp, not long ago, Atlantic Packaging, ND Paper just announced something also in North America. Are we going to continue to get more capacity announcements? And are there going to be more where they're turning around really fast because they're taking a machine, making something else, and actually just starting to make more paper on it quickly?
Yeah, what we've seen is I've always built in some assumed capacity into my numbers. I had some of that built into my chart that I have. But what happens is those really get filled in with confirmed projects fairly quickly. And I don't really have much room in the capacity expansion numbers in North America for many more projects to be announced. I think the big issue we have is this capacity that can come in from the graphics paper side with the unexpected demise of graphic paper this year. That has accelerated the amount of capacity that's coming in. Conversions have been a fact of life in the North American market for 10 years ago. It started with conversions coming out of newsprint, but we're getting up to the point now where the conversions that are coming are some of the better uncoated free sheet mills that have integrated kraft pulp mills on site. And it's a way to use that valuable pulp. And I think that's a big incentive that we have feeding North America.
Right, that seems to be perhaps a difference of some significance because, a number of the early conversion efforts really didn't pan out. Does it feel like the ones like the Packaging Corps, obviously, and the Domtars, are they distinctly different because the underlying assets they're beginning with are that much better? Or thoughts you might have there?
Yeah, I think the value is that there is the pulp mill on site. The pulp mill is the most difficult thing to build. There hasn't been a virgin containerboard mill built in the U.S. since I started doing forecasts 37 years ago. There was the potential that Sun Paper could have started up. It was the first time anyone went through the permitting process, but that they were 2 years in, and then that ended. With the pulp mills that are available, especially if they're in regions that have the southern pine, that makes a very nice craft liner. It's a way of bringing capacity into the market, and then you have alternatives of how you can do that. But we've seen a number of the containerboard companies are doing this, and if they don't have graphic paper assets, they are purchasing some, such as Bear Island or Catawba, where New Indian Cascades are going out purchasing the idled graphic paper that have the pulping on site. And so I think that's where the U.S. stands apart, is we have a lot of available pulp.
Well, Gleb, how about in Europe? So we see what we've got. As we look forward, is there probably going to be more announcements, or conversely, might we get some capacity taken out? How do you expect it to play out?
Yeah, so obviously quite a few projects that start around now. So this year, for example, they were planned some time ago during a much better sort of a situation in general in the market. They were, of course, impacted. In general, Europe is impacted by, as US, by low raw material prices, so by low paper for recycling prices. And looking at the margins of producers, they're not that bad historically. They're actually quite good, considering they even the decline in prices we've seen or recently over the last couple of years. So I would say comparing that with some of the graphic paper producers, who just struggle to find the market, and they have basically a dilemma to close or to convert somewhere. We might see some attempts potentially for further conversions. I think you shouldn't rule out this possibility, but fundamentally, of course, there is still some capacity that will be closed. There is some smaller mills that are still operating that are so much higher in variable production costs than most of the industry. And this new capacities, this state-of-the-art new capacities that are being added now in Europe, they just push down the average cash cost for the industry much lower. So a lot of these capacities will sooner or later exit the market. The problem is that these are often much smaller capacities. So if you add even a lot of them, it still will be less than one machine of Pro Group that just started now in August of 750,000 tons. So the new capacity is huge, and the exit of historically of the smaller machines is sort of a long process. A lot of it is owned by family-owned companies, and unless big integrated producers step in and close some of the capacity, it's sort of a more long and process before some major amount of capacity will be closed.
And in curiosity, are you seeing at all a shift to more craft liner, particularly if any of the conversion from graphic papers? What's happening from a fiber balance perspective with the new capacity?
Yes, there is new kraftliner, of course, capacity being added. We have Stora Enso, of course, converting their older mill from graphic papers, and we will have Ilim adding more huge mill, but it will be mostly focused on exports to Asia in eastern part of Russia. We have SCA with their project in a few years from now, building a new machine, a more efficient machine that will also lead to additional capacity on the top. And of course, Mondi's project at Rosenberg in Slovakia is also sort of a mixed furnish project. So depending on where you are, you might classify it differently. So we have a lot of virgin related additions as well. And it's obvious that a big part of that capacity will be focused on exporting on the global markets, as well as sort of with the focus on Europe. So all of this capacity cannot be absorbed by Europe alone, that's for sure. So some of these projects are more clearly focused on exports, and some of them will be probably just spread out across the globe.
And Beth, I don't envy having to be in your place to try to answer the same question. But as you look forward in terms of additional capacity to be added versus the shuts, and you referenced this briefly in your prior comments, any kind of guiding principles that help you think through how things might play out and kind of the key factors to stay abreast of?
The key factors that I think I'm finding is actually, one, whatever changing recovered paper policies there are in other parts of Asia. So, there's some sort of like trickle down. So I would say Indonesia first started looking carefully at what they were doing in terms of imports and what they were allowed and placing limits. I think they're struggling through still a little bit on how they're going to implement it. I don't know if Hannah's going to talk on that a little bit, I think on Wednesday. But I think they've eased off a little bit, or they're looking at it a little bit more. I think I recently read that Vietnam is about to ban mixed paper imports starting at the end of 2021. So it's really about what other countries are doing in terms of, what's going to happen for capacity there versus in China. Because the other thing that's happening is I think the Chinese producers are struggling to maintain the strength and the quality of their board. If you read some of Nine Dragons' comments, I think one of the reasons why they're going into pulp is because they can't get the strength that they used to get from the OCC from the US in the OCC that they collect domestically. There's just not the strength. So they can get it through the recovered paper pulp to some extent, but they're also now looking to invest in pulp, I think, to help sort of make themselves stand out in terms of the quality of their product. We haven't seen Li and Man and Shanying go in that direction as far as I know, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think Shanying has invested a little bit more, and Li and Man, in the recovered paper pulp. My numbers could be off, but they seem to have a little bit more of that, I would say, than Nine Dragons does. So they may be, looking at different directions. But so, those I think are the key factors that are going to have to be considered, is what happens to the recovered paper policies in other parts of Asia. And then how does China adapt? Does the closures that I talked about really happen? Do you continue to see a lot of investment or not in China?
We have a few questions from the audience, which I'm going to get to in just 1 second. But just as a follow-up first to Beth, you're from way back when I was at a different shop that they did a lot of investment banking in China. And I kept on hearing about how in southern China, they were going to grow all these forests and that they could make pulp and then containerboard from that wood. I don't really hear about that much. What's happening in terms of their building a fiber basket to actually improve the quality?
As far as I know, that they have been building a fiber basket. I've actually been asking that question a lot because of the bevy of announcements you've seen in terms of actually on carton board, and particularly virgin carton board. There's a number of announcements of new capacity going on in China there. And so I've been asking John North, our international timber guy, are they going to have enough to support it? And he seems to think yes, that they will. But my sense is, like, as I said, I think they're looking at more on the virgin carton board grades than so much adding it to go into the container board grades. Nine Dragons at this point, I think, is the exception. And then the other thing that you can start to question is what happens as you see conversions of machines, to the extent that they have pulp. Now, a lot of the printing and writing paper producers in China depend on market pulp, but like AA paper and their conversion, if you go onto their website, they talk about our quality is much better than you see elsewhere because we're using a lot more pulp than other people. I don't think they quite put it to the point of, we're kraftliner similar to what's coming out of the US, but they do talk about having, pulp on both outer layers. APP could get into that direction too. I think they've been struggling a little bit more with the new regulations in Indonesia on recovered paper, since that was their, I think, initial plan on the fiber side. So it'll be interesting to watch those dynamics in terms of conversions and how that could affect things.
Well, I may be leaning on, because I think you also do paper in Asia as well. I mean, are we seeing the same trends in graphic papers in Asia from a demand side, or is it different? And with the kind of the follow-up being, is there the risk of conversions, more conversions like AA paper from graphic papers to containerboard?
I mean, you are seeing the declines, not quite to the extent that I think you're seeing, say, in North America. China, I'd say on the coated side, it's going down. On the uncoated, yeah, this year we think it's going down, but generally it's not it's sloping downward, but not quite as steeply, I would say. Japan, I think, is probably worse off, say, than compared to China. So, there are positive and negatives. There's not quite as much pressure as I would say as in North America and Europe.
Okay, great. So a few of the questions from the audience. First, I'll stay with you, Beth. How does India factor in?
How does India factor in? So, India is a large growing market apart from this year. India's been pretty devastated by COVID and its spread, the sudden lockdown, the lockdown that lasts a while. From what we've heard, things are gradually coming back, but they're coming back from a very deep hole. And, they're still fighting. But the difference in India, and when you start talking about containerboard, is the machines are small, mostly smaller. They deal with local markets. They have expanded their exports somewhat, but I wouldn't put them in as a major player. I think a couple of the companies looked at investing in India, but I haven't heard about those projects really proceeding. I think they all ended up diverting to Malaysia or other locations as maybe a little bit more investment friendly or easier to deal with, having all the facilities that were needed, etc. So, India is going to be the growth market in the future, but I think there's a lot of issues that still have to be, dealt with, and particularly the economy has to be revived.
Okay, and the next one, and Gleb got to this a little bit, maybe kind of more global answer to it. Although we have more capacity coming online, most of it is recycled. For the virgin side, thinking only about virgin demand, do you see a better forecast?
On the virgin side, we do see growth in virgin capacity being possible because we're going into the integrated graphic paper mills that are converting, that have pulp lines. We are actually looking at our global models. We have a need to bring virgin capacity into the OCC system, but because we are already pushing so far up against the limits of OCC recovery globally. I think Hannah's numbers are something like 90% recovery rate globally on the OCC side, which is really pushing you right up as far as you can go. If you go back to 2017, before China started to announce their reductions in imports, there were a lot of concerns that, were we at the limits? We were seeing rising OCC prices. We've had a 5-year disruption in trade as China's backed out of the market, but the whole overall situation is the same, that there are limitations on how much further we can reach on the recycled side. So there's a need to bring some virgin capacity in. And there is a large amount of available integrated capacity that can be converted in North America. So I can see kraft growing over time, the kraft liner. It will be a shift from what we've seen historically, where recycled has been replacing kraft liner.
one follow-up on that first would be the eucalyptus, Eucaliner. It's a bit of a technical question, not sure anybody here can answer it. Will that have the same characteristics that we can just view that as craft liner when we think about the global fiber system and reusability, et cetera? Or is it different?
Wish we had someone from Klabin on the line to answer, because they might have a different answer from other people that are out trying it. I think it's out there in trials to see how well it can work in the system. It's a test, but if it works well, it creates an alternative where you don't have to have just conversions from integrated graphic paper mills to containerboard mills supplying virgin fiber. It's another way that virgin fiber can come into the system.
Okay. And Gleb, coming back to the, there's more supply being built in Europe than likely demand will be able to absorb. Do you think that there is a specific export strategy that the companies are developing, or is it going to be a wait and see, and wherever there's room for it, that's where it goes?
Yeah, I think speaking to add first a few words about Eucaliner, for example, I think the containerboard markets are really moving into more sort of a segmentation. There are more different grades being developed with different furnishes, with mixed furnishes. You have all different type of segments being developed. And for some of the European capacities, they're clearly targeting specific segments, which will be a more not really a specific geography, but more sort of a global segments in their specific types of paper. So there, of course, the more niche you go, the more export oriented it will be on the global markets. And some of the capacity that is sort of a more like brown recycled containerboard with a sort of average base weights, it will be more staying local, but maybe more lightweight or more mixed furnish or more premium furnish like craft liners. They will, of course, will go more for exports. The problem is that even on the brown recycle side, you have so much new capacity that is that even this capacity that is historically more staying regionally within Europe will need to increasingly go for exports, and that's what we see this year. And a lot of it goes outside of usual sort of export markets of North Africa or Middle East to China this year. So that is something that is a change from before, and a lot of it really European machines, especially new state-of-the-art machines that can produce very good quality lightweight paper that is not available everywhere, like in Southeast Asia, for example. It's not really something that they can do in such volumes you can do in Europe. So there are some advantages in specific segments which they will target.
Well, and me kind of following up the concept of eucalyptus. So the specific question is, do you see Eucaliner being produced also outside of Brazil and other eucalyptus growing countries, or through the importation of eucalyptus pulp and then the manufacture of containerboard? And maybe as a part of that question, I mean, is a company like APP, are they doing things with the wood fiber that they have, which is trying to accomplish similar types of things that Klabin has been able to? Well, we'll see the final results, but seems to be able to be achieving. Beth, maybe start with you.
I mean, I have not heard that APP is trying any of that at this point, any of the conversions they're doing and such. I think some of it they're doing into like craft paper, like food type packaging grades. And then they're going into more the recycled linerboard or medium type grades. They haven't converted a whole lot yet. I think they have one machine that they're still waiting on. I'm not sure. There was one announcement and then they later came out and said, no, it's still delayed. So I'm not sure what the timing on that one is at this point. But I have not heard of any plans yet for Eucaliner. I think they're working on other things at this point.
Okay. maybe shifting gears a little bit to the biggest challenges to bringing on this new supply. I'm most familiar with the North American market, and investors in particular think about the integration of the market from board to box, and that unless you have a captive customer, it's going to be quite hard to compete. How important a factor, Ken, first of all, do you see that in the North American market? And then we'll go to Gleb and Beth. And are there other types of challenges or constraints that we should be thinking about, such that one just can't say, oh, this is plain and simple, the economics are there, they're just going to build a ton of capacity and we're going to be swimming in supply, but maybe not for what potential reasons? Maybe Ken first on North America.
Yeah, I think you've already hit the biggest challenge in North America is just the very high degree of integration. And it makes it difficult for anyone to find someone to buy the containerboard you're going to be making when there's a very limited number of independent corrugators out there that will be willing to go out and buy tonnage from a new entrant to the market, unless they really know that new entrant is going to be around a long time. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Okay.
But North America is a strange market.
Gleb, any thoughts on Europe?
There are, of course, a lot of sort of potential threats, I would say. Again, the same thing, integration is also important. We have new supply coming that is not integrated at all, and new that is announced that will come in the midterm. That also is an issue sort of in the longer term, as we will see likely more consolidation. Then I would say another thing to consider is European regulation. There is a lot of focus on reducing CO2 emissions in the long term. And even sort of a 20, 30 years from now, it's not really so long term for these investments. And we see a lot of discussion at the European level how the new system on moving away from fossil fuels will look like. So that represents a challenge for certain parts of the industry, especially sort of smaller independent mills, which rely heavily on coal or gas. So there is a challenge there. And of course, the fiber, I think in the long term, in the short term, of course, there is a lot of oversupply of OCC and mixed paper just because of this shock from China, which is very short term. But if you think long term, in terms of the good quality material in Europe, it's also sort of we will soon reach this stage when it will be a problem, because European share of virgin fiber in the overall containerboard demand is much lower than in the US, for example. So the quality of the material is sort of going down over time. And especially for some regions, it will become an issue. And for some regions, it's even an issue right now in Eastern Europe, for example, where you don't have enough domestic recycling. So these are just some of the issues, but of course there are many more if you dig deeper.
And that probably dovetails, Beth, with some of your thoughts for Asia, but maybe if you could expound.
Yeah, there's not nearly the degree of integration in Asia as there is in North America, and I think it's probably even less than there is in Europe. The two major Japanese companies, Nippon and Oji, they have integration, and you hear them about their corrugated plants in other parts of Asia. But like, I think Nine Dragons has just a little bit. Chanying, I think, has some. The biggest one might be the Siam Cement Group. That's the big Thai producer. Plus, they recently bought Faja in Indonesia. They have some, but it's not nearly to the extent that you have in other places. It will be interesting to see moving forward to the extent that some of these larger companies, see what it can do in North America and start doing more of it. And buying up maybe some of the larger corrugators. But, the markets there are so big that, I think it would take a while in order to see that kind of sort of purchasing to integrate it that much. So that's probably not as much of an influence. I think it's more around the environmental things and around the recovered paper policies across the different countries. That's what's really going to drive it.
Super. We got three or 4 minutes and two questions still yet to answer from the audience. So one of them, fairly specific, lightweight inner liner. I'm actually not even familiar with that term, but lightweight inner liner has seen a huge increase in demand in China, 42, 45, 48 GSM from newsprint conversions. That trend has not happened anywhere else. Do you see that as a trend that could come up in other markets? What is the driver for this product in China?
I guess I can start. Yeah, I think a lot of the newsprint producers have developed this niche product, and China is such a large market that they have been able to find, uses. The lighter weight really helps for certain types of products or packaging of certain types of products that don't require quite as much in terms of protection or strength. And so I expect that these producers will continue to, try to push into that niche as much as possible. And the end users will, try to support it as much as they can to the extent that it helps drive down their costs by using lighter weights. So, I can see it, as a gradual trend that could continue in China and parts of Asia.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add here a quick comment. I think it's a function on both the level of OCC prices in China and the prices for board in China at the moment, and the just dramatic situation on the newsprint market. So these two things combined just mean that this is a product which newsprint producers can sort of sell, which is very non-traditional product that they can sell in China.
Okay, great. And then the last one. So who are the winners and losers of this global overcapacity issue? Maybe Gleb, if you want to kick off any thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's in the end it's all about costs. We just had I think in the North American conference a really good speech from Anthony Pratt about the cost competitiveness of the substrate, how important it is in the long term for any of the substrate to keep its competitiveness. And by that we mean to decrease the cost versus the alternatives. So from this perspective, the new state-of-the-art machines or really well done conversions, which can actually push the cost curve down for the overall industry, is something that is important. And I think in Europe we had quite a few state-of-the-art machines that are either started already or starting up or will start in the near future, and they will certainly benefit in any case. No matter where you are in the business cycle, they will make good money just because they're so well below the average cash cost. And I think these machines will certainly benefit, and Europe from that perspective will. I'm optimistic, of course, about Europe since I'm a European economist, but I'm sure Ken can add some more thoughts there on North America as well.
And Beth, any 20 seconds on Asia you want to share, and we'll let then Ken finish it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much more to add there. I think I've highlighted, most of my comments. So let's give Ken the last 20 seconds or whatever we got.
Okay, quick 20-second summary. Global oversupply does benefit the buyers. It gives them more consistent cost for their packaging. And you're going in with the new machines coming in. The new machines are more efficient. I think it gives them a win on the sustainability front too.
Great. Well, everybody, appreciate your time, and I think we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this demo episode of the Fastmarkets Pulp and Paper podcast. We'd love to get your feedback on content, format, or any other aspect of this demo episode. Please send your feedback by email to me, Matt Graves, at mgraves@fastmarkets.com.